America, this is Germany calling. And that is the end of the German popular concert. And we're now going to broadcast news in English. Our fourth news bulletin of the day. We are operating over 5 stations in the 25, 28 of May. It was 8:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're operating over 5 stations in the 25, 31, 41, and 49 meter band. Our station BZD in the 28 meter band will join us again in 15 minutes. And here is the news. Today's official German war communique reads as follows. From the Führer's headquarters, December the 28th, the German Supreme Command announces. In the southern sector of the Eastern Front, the enemy, who had succeeded in making local penetration, was thrown back in successful counterattacks. German, Italian, and Slovakian troops, as well as the SS Division Viking, made up of Danish, Finnish, Flemish, Dutch, and Norwegian volunteers, have again proved their valor. On the central sector of the front, strong enemy attacks were brought to a standstill after fierce fighting. Minor Soviet attacks on the northern sector were also repulsed. On all sectors of the front, the Luftwaffe participated in the ground fighting by carrying out effective raids on enemy positions and on the enemy supply and railway system in the rear. In the Straits of Kerch, strong German bomber and Stuka formations continued their attacks against enemy shipping. 3 transports totaling 2,800 tons were sunk, and 4 more ships as well as a gunboat were damaged. Last night, German bombers sank a British merchant ship of 6,000 tons off the English east coast. British naval units carried out a raid of 2 out-of-the-way planks on the Norwegian coast on the 27th of December. After short but fierce fighting between the British landing parties and parent patrols of the United Army, the British troops were forced to re-embark. German bombers attacked the retreating British naval squadron and sank a destroyer. Another destroyer and a cruiser were damaged. 10 enemy bombers were shot down in aerial engagements as well as by anti-aircraft fire. When the enemy approached the Norwegian coast, the German patrol boat Föhn was attacked by numerous British bombers. After successfully shooting down an enemy plane, the Föhn went down in action against a numerically far superior enemy, a cruiser and several destroyers. Several Norwegian merchant vessels employed in peaceful coastal service were attacked and sunk by the British. In North Africa, the enemy's attacks against German-Italian positions were frustrated. Formations of the German Air Force attacked British aerodromes, supply columns, and camps in the Cyrenaica with good effect. During raids on aerodromes and harbors on mortar, German fighters, escorting the bomber formation, shot down 3 enemy airplanes. Last night, British bombers attacked western Germany. The civilian population suffered some casualties, a few of which were fatal. According to reports so far received, 10 enemy bombers were shot down by night fighters and anti-aircraft guns. That concludes today's German war communique. German fighters shot down 12 Bolshevik planes yesterday, according to reports so far received. In the central and northern sectors, squadrons of German bombers effectively attacked Bolshevik columns, troop concentrations, and railway lines. A train loaded with tanks and trucks was destroyed, and 6 other trains heavily damaged. 2 guns and a large number of motor vehicles were destroyed. In the Karelian area, German bombers destroyed a number of locomotives and severed the Merman railway lines at several points. In low-level attacks, the German bombers put 5 enemy anti-aircraft guns out of commission with machine gun and cannon fire. This is Berlin, broadcasting the news. The victorious Japanese naval and army units, which had taken Hong Kong, marched into the city this afternoon. At 2 o'clock, Rear Admiral Masato Nimi and Lieutenant General Ryu Sakai reviewed a parade of the troops in Kowloon. Accompanied by several submissions, the two Japanese officers crossed over to Hong Kong at the same point, where on December the 18th, the Japanese troops had advanced from Kowloon to Hong Kong under the fire of British batteries. The two high officers then mounted their horses and at the head of their formation rode down Queen's Road, where for 2.5 miles the Japanese troops lined the streets. Squadrons of airplanes roared at low level over Queen's Road while the troops were being inspected. After the conclusion of the military ceremony, the Rear Admiral Nimni and Lieutenant General Sakar received representatives of the population in the residence of the governor. At the same time, Japanese military authorities took over the public installations and traffic system of the city. According to Domei, Japanese troops in their attack on Singapore have reached a point south of the Popham Line. This line, which was supposed to withstand any attack for at least 3 months, was broken through in exactly 24 hours. The greatest part of the defenders, consisting of about 20,000 Indian troops, has been decimated to a fraction of its former strength. The British retreat evidently was a hasty one because they left behind them 40 tanks, 6 cannon of various caliber, 20 automobiles, and large numbers of other weapons. The battlefield south of the Popham Line narrows down to a road approximately 6 yards wide. This highway was systematically fortified with bunkers, tank traps, and barbed wire entanglements. It was the only road open for the Japanese, as impenetrable jungle lined both sides of the road. The British had evidently planned to lure the Japanese into this roadway and, after cutting them off from their reinforcements, annihilate them. After the defense line began to crumble, the not over-enthusiastic Indian troops, which had withdrawn, became enraged over the British officers who had preferred to stay well behind the firing lines. A number of dead British officers who had evidently been killed by the Indian soldiers were found later by the Japanese troops. Continuing the news from Berlin. The Speaker of the Army Department of the Imperial Japanese Headquarters in Tokyo stated that the Japanese command on Luzon discarded the declaration of Manila as an open city. The Japanese speaker continued by stating that the Japanese troops would not permit this one-sided declaration to interfere with the execution of all measures necessary for the carrying on of the war. The speaker referred to the fact that Manila itself is the nerve center of the Philippine resistance and that the city is surrounded by important military and naval installations. The Japanese army speaker, however, stressed the fact that Japanese forces would limit their attacks to military objectives and nothing would be undertaken which resembled in the least the American, and that the city is surrounded by important military and naval installations. The Japanese army speaker, however, stressed the fact that Japanese forces would limit their attacks to military objectives and nothing would be undertaken which resembled in the least the American massacre of innocent Japanese nationals, such as took place shortly before the Japanese landing on Davao. The Japanese speaker further explained that it was desired that the Filipino and United States forces remaining at present in Manila should withdraw from the city to 2 points which the Japanese headquarters named and which are Antipolo and Contactan. The Japanese army speaker stated further that the Imperial Japanese headquarters viewed the declaration of Manila as an open city as an attempt to arouse anti-Japanese feeling among the Filipinos by involving them directly in the actual hostilities. It is significant, the Japanese army speaker concluded, that the American authorities had issued orders to the Filipinos not to evacuate Manila, notwithstanding the approach of the Japanese forces. The American effort the American assets, now frozen in Japan, amount to more than 1,800,000,000 yen. The spokesman of the Japanese Finance Ministry stated yesterday. He emphasized that Japanese assets frozen in Great Britain and the United States have amounted to half that sum. Another strong contingent of French volunteers for the fight against Bolshevism has arrived at Versailles en route to the Eastern Front, it is reported from Paris. Within the past few weeks, heavy fighting has been taking place on the Finnish front east of Helsinki. In a true spirit of comradeship, Finnish and German troops have struck heavily against the Soviets in the thick forests where ice and snow impede and the cold most intense. During the course of these operations, numerous small enemy detachments were completely crushed. During the past 4 weeks, more than 1,700 Bolshevik bunkers and other types of resistance nets, equipped with machine guns and cannon, were put out of commission one after another and totally demolished. Sufficient proof that the fighting had been extremely fierce and bitter. Bolshevik relief operations came to naught when German and Finnish units carried out a number of counter thrusts which resulted in Soviet retreats and tremendous losses for the Bolsheviks. Thousands of Soviets were left behind on the field of battle and almost countless numbers of others landed in prison camps. In addition, the Bolsheviks lost huge quantities of rifles, machine guns, trench mortars, cannon, winter equipment, and other war material. Franklin Delano Roosevelt promised peace but brought you war. And this, ladies and gentlemen, ends our fourth news bulletin in English in our transmission for North America. Thank you for your attention. Further news will be broadcast at 10:30 and 12 o'clock midnight Eastern Standard Time. The next news bulletin being due in exactly 2 hours and 3 minutes from now, as I said, 10:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It is now. You will be listening to Lord Haw Haw. And in the meantime, I hope you will enjoy a little music. Hello, North America. Germany calling. We're operating again over 6 stations, 2 in the 25, and the others in the 28, 31, 41, and 49 meter band. We now present Lord Haw Haw speaking to England.
To say that the British Empire is in danger today would be a very feeble understatement. Never before has it been in such a perilous position. Until Roosevelt and Churchill so needlessly provoked Japan into taking up arms, the greater part of the British Empire felt itself outside the war zone. Of course, to be outside the war zone is not necessarily to be safe. For example, Canada was secure against any attack by Germany or Italy. But she was not secure against peaceful penetration by the United States. The agreement just concluded, whereby the virtual control of her industries falls into American hands, and whereby tariffs, customs, and other functions of independence may be arbitrarily removed by a committee under American domination, this charter of Canadian subjugation was not a mushroom growth. It was rather the culmination, at a suitable moment, of the plans which Roosevelt and his predecessors have been making for years to exclude British influence from both American continents. And, as a member of the Rockefeller family recently said in public, to give the United States a monopoly in the Western Hemisphere. Mr. Kessler, the Australian Prime Minister, has addressed directly to President Roosevelt what amounts to an appeal for aid without safeguards. How far this message was inspired by Churchill himself, I cannot say. But Roosevelt now has his excuse for landing troops in Australia and keeping them there if he can until that inconceivable day when all Britain's debts to the United States shall have been paid. A member of the New Zealand cabinet declares that the most perilous moment in the history of his country has arrived. What the peoples of Australia and New Zealand may be thinking is easy to imagine. Their troops are fighting in North Africa to gain for Churchill prestige and propaganda victories, which, as previous events have shown, can exert no influence upon the issue of the war as a whole. They are at war with Japan, who has shown a most remarkable talent for carrying out multiple attacks on the widest scale. And on the other hand, they know that if American troops appear in the guise of saviors, they will remain in the role of bailiffs. They cannot be reassured by statements from the BBC to their effect that the home government sympathizes with their position, understands their concern, and will not forget them, but that on the other hand they cannot expect the British forces to be everywhere at the same time. While such useless phrases might be accepted by the patient, docile, and uncritical British public, they are not sufficient to assuage the colonial unrest. Now, it is all the more remarkable that the United States should be gaining such an ascendancy over the British Empire, when Roosevelt's conduct of the war against Japan has been such a signal failure up to the present. Having lost his Pacific fleet, he can hardly afford to pose as the master of the situation. And yet, Mr. Churchill will, in my opinion, bow to his wishes, even more obsequiously than in the past. Without wishing in the smallest degree to underestimate the function of air power in the East Asian and Pacific War, a function which the Japanese have demonstrated with splendid success, I cannot help attributing Britain's present horrible dilemma to her naval weakness, at least in large part. A theatre of war, including the Pacific Ocean, must needs raise great naval problems. If any British Prime Minister today were able to compensate for American naval losses by sending a large fleet to the Pacific, he could, if he had the will, tell Roosevelt to keep his hands off the Empire. The Royal Navy has no ships to spare, and the fate of the Prince of Wales and the Repulse is a token that a few warships would not be enough. Many are needed. The absolute size of the Navy is of secondary importance in comparison with the range of tasks which it has to perform. For example, Switzerland does not need any battle cruisers. No navy can be, or at any rate can within years, be large enough to do battle against powerful opponents in all the waters of the world at the same time. The rulers of states interested in naval warfare must therefore either restrict their commitments or take the consequences. Germany, for example, did not require a large navy. Britain did. And in this respect, the British preparations for war were very inadequate. For many decades, Britain maintained her position in Eastern Asia on the strength of prestige and her navy, the two factors being very closely related. Leaving aside all questions of morality, let us say that if successive British governments, their chance of success was dependent, in large measure, on naval supremacy. Had Britain abstained from European entanglements, had her rulers renounced the claim to meddle in European affairs, then the power of the British power in Eastern Asia might well have endured longer. It might have been possible to indulge the luxury of interfering with the peoples of Asia by refraining from the attempt to dominate Europe as well, although in the East the prestige of Britain has been declining for many years now. But the task of dominating both Europe and Asia is infinitely too great for Britain and the United States combined. When the demands on the Royal Navy were such that every single warship had to do the work of at least half a dozen, surely it would have been a prudent policy to leave Japan alone, and at least to abstain from provocation of the type that Roosevelt and Churchill seemed to think so valorous. In November alone, the German forces sank the following British naval units: 1 aircraft carrier, 1 cruiser, 3 destroyers, and a number of smaller vessels. They damaged 2 battleships, include the Prince of Wales, the Repulse, and the seaplane carrier Unicorn of 14,500 tons. That's only a part of the price paid for the attempt to wage naval warfare on the Churchillian scale. Losses at this rate render far more difficult the task of the British commanders in solving every problem the war presents. Naval power for Britain is not an independent function. It is an indispensable aspect of our war potential as a whole. The United States are compact. The defense of their territory in the North American continent is no difficult matter. But the British Empire is scattered all over the world and is incomparably more assailable than the USA. What Roosevelt may lose in the Pacific is small in comparison with what Britain stands to lose. Even India is threatened. Canada is practically an American dominion ruled by Roosevelt. The fate of Australia and New Zealand hangs in the balance. The Royal Air Force is too weak. The Royal Navy is too weak. And as yet, the common sense of the British people is too weak to perceive the catastrophic nature of the plight into which they have allowed Churchill to lead them.
Germany calling, hello North America. You have just been listening to Haw Haw. And this talk by Haw Haw will be repeated at 10:45 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tonight. We should like now to repeat an announcement for 9 o'clock. At 9 o'clock, in 18 minutes from now, you will be listening to an interview with Jane Anderson and 2 Latvian women who journeyed during the Christmas season to Berlin to request Jane Anderson to deliver a message to the American people concerning the ravages of the Red Terror during the occupation of Latvia by communist forces.